Welcome to Story Station, Episode 4. In this episode, you can listen to 3 Egyptian stories. The first story is titled, The Robbers. Listen to this exciting story of a builder and 2 sons who robbed the king. But in the end, the king gives his daughter to the robber in marriage. But why? Second story is titled, The Green Jewel. Listen to this story of a chief scribe who, like Moses divides an ocean in half, he divides a lake in half. The third story is titled, The Caravan. Listen to this heartwarming story of a newly born baby camel's first adventure in a caravan. Hope you enjoy it! Today I will read an Egyptian story called The Robbers. The monarch was called Ramsenitis. He built the western portion of the Temple of Ptah. He also erected 2 statues, one to summer, which faced the north and was worshipped, and the other to winter, which faced the south, but was never honored. The king possessed great wealth, and he caused to be constructed beside the palace a strong stone chamber, in which he kept his riches. One of the builders, however, contrived to place a stone in such a manner that it could be removed from the outside. It chanced that, after the king had deposited his treasure in the chamber, the builder was stricken with illness, and knew his end was nigh. He had 2 sons, and he told him his secret regarding the stone, and gave them the measurements so that they might locate it. After the man died, the sons went forth in the darkness of night, and when they found the stone they removed it. They entered the chamber and carried away much treasure, and ere they departed they closed up the wall again. The king marvelled greatly when he discovered that his riches had been plundered, for the seals of the door were unbroken, and he knew not whom to suspect. Again and again the robbers returned, and the treasure diminished greatly. At length the king caused traps to be laid in the chamber, for his guards, who kept watch at the entrances, were unable to prevent the mysterious robberies. Soon after the brothers returned, they removed the stone, and one of them entered stealthily. He went towards the treasure, as was his custom, but was suddenly caught in a trap. In a moment he realized that escape was impossible, and he reflected that he would be put to death on the morrow, while his brother would be seized and similarly punished. So he said to himself, I alone will die. When he had thus resolved to save his brother, he called to him softly in the darkness, bidding him to enter cautiously. He made known his great misfortune, and said, I cannot escape, nor dare you tarry long, lest you be discovered. When they find me here I will be recognized, and they will seize you and put you to death. Cut off my head at once, so that they may not know who I am, and thus save your own life. With a sad heart the brother did as he was desired, and carried away the head. Ere he escaped in the darkness, he replaced the stone, and no man saw him. When morning came, the king was more astounded than ever to find a headless body entrapped in the treasure chamber, for the door had not been opened, and yet 2 men had entered and one had escaped. He commanded that the corpse should be hung on the palace wall, and stationed guards at the place, bidding them to keep strict watch, so that they might discover if anyone came to sorrow for the dead man. But no one came nigh. Meanwhile the mother grieved in secret. His heart was filled with anger because the body was exposed in such a manner, and she threatened to inform the king regarding all that had happened, if her other son would not contrive to carry away the corpse. The young man attempted to dissuade her, but she only repeated her threat, and that firmly. He therefore made preparations to obtain possession of the corpse. He hired several donkeys, and on their backs put many skins of wine. In the evening he drove them towards the palace. When he drew near to the guards, who kept watch over his brother's body, he removed the stoppers of some of the skins. The wine ran forth upon the highway, and he began to lament aloud, and beat his head as if he were in sore distress. The soldiers ran towards the donkeys and seized them, and caught the wine in vessels, claiming it for themselves. At first the brother pretended to be angry, and abused the men, but when they had pacified him, as they thought, he spoke to them pleasantly, and began to make secure the stoppers of all the skins. In a short time he was chatting with the guards, and pretended to be much amused when they bantered him over the accident. Then he invited them to drink, and they filled their flasks readily. So they began. The young man poured out wine until they were all made very drunk. When they fell asleep, the cunning fellow took down his brother's body, and laid it upon the back of one of the donkeys. Ere he went away, he shaved the right cheeks of the soldiers. His mother welcomed him on his return in the darkness, and was well pleased. The king was very angry when he discovered how the robber had tricked the guards, but he was still determined to have him taken. He sent forth his daughter in disguise, and she waited for the criminal. She spoke to several men, and at length she found him, because he came to know that he was sought and desired to deal cunningly with her. So he addressed her, and she offered to be his bride if he would tell her the most artful thing, and also the most wicked thing he had ever done. He answered readily, "The most wicked thing I ever did was to cut off my brother's head when he was caught in a trap in the royal treasure chamber, and the most artful was to deceive the king's guards and carry away the body." The princess tried to seize him, but he thrust forth his brother's arm, which he carried under his robe, and when she clutched it, he made speedy escape. Great was then the astonishment of the king at the cunning and daring of the robber. He caused a proclamation to be made, offering him a free pardon and a generous reward if he would appear at the palace before him. The man went readily, and his Majesty was so delighted with his speeches and great ingenuity that he gave him his daughter in marriage. There is no more artful people than the Egyptians, but this man had not his equal in the world. The end. I hope you enjoyed this story. The next story begins in a moment. Today I will read the Egyptian story, The Green Jewel. Prince Khafra stood before his Majesty and said, "I will relate a marvel which happened in the days of King Sneferu, thy father." Then he told the story of the Green Jewel. Sneferu was one day disconsolate and weary. He wandered about the palace with desire to be cheered, nor was there aught to take the gloom from his mind. He caused his chief scribe to be brought before him, and said, "I would fain have entertainment, but I cannot find any in this place." The scribe said, "Thy Majesty should go boating on the lake, and let the rowers be the prettiest girls in your harem. It will delight your heart to see them splashing the water where the birds dived, and to gaze upon the green shores and the flowers and trees. I myself will go with you." The king consented, and 20 virgins who were fair to behold went into the boat, and they rowed with oars of ebony which were decorated with gold. His Majesty took pleasure in the outing, and the gloom passed from his heart as the boat went hither and thither, and the girls sang together with sweet voices. It chanced, as they were turning round, an oar handle brushed against the hair of the girl who was steering, and shook from it a green jewel, which fell into the water. She lifted up her oar and stopped singing, and the others grew silent and ceased rowing. Said Sneferu, "Do not pause, let us go on still farther." The girl said, "She who steers has lifted her oar." Said Sneferu to her, "Why have you lifted your oar?" "Alas! I have lost my green jewel," she said. "It has fallen into the lake." Sneferu said, "I will give you another. Let us go on." The girl pouted and made answer, "I would rather have my own green jewel again than any other." His Majesty said to the chief scribe, "I am given great enjoyment by this novelty. Indeed, my mind is much refreshed as the girls row me up and down the lake. Now one of them has lost her green jewel, which has dropped into the water, and she wants it back again and will not have another to replace it." The chief scribe at once muttered a spell. Then by reason of his magic words the waters of the lake were divided like a lane. He went down and found the green jewel which the girl had lost, and came back with it to her. When he did that, he again uttered words of power, and the waters came together as they were before. The king was well pleased, and when he had full enjoyment with the rowing upon the lake, he returned to the palace. He gave gifts to the chief scribe, and every one wondered at the marvel which he had accomplished. Such was Khafra's tale of the green jewel, and King Khufu commanded that offerings should be laid in the tombs of Sneferu and his chief scribe, who was a great magician. The end. I hope you liked this story. The next story begins in a moment. Today I'm going to be reading an Egyptian story called The Caravan. The man bent over and picked up the heavy bags filled with precious spices like cinnamon, black pepper, vanilla, and cocoa, and loaded them on the back of the camel. He then brought smaller bags filled with frankincense, gold, precious stones, pearls, myrrh, tea, grains, and the finest cloths made of silk. He even tossed a heavy carpet made of goat hair onto the camel's back. There were over 100 camels in the caravan, and each was carrying many of the same things, ready to travel the long hot drive across the desert's sandy dunes. The camels began their trek, loaded with goods. Their masters, who were called grooms, led the camels as they began their adventure. Only the first camel in the seemingly never-ending line carried a groom. The other grooms walked, and the other camels were loaded too heavy to carry a person. The camel at the very end of the train wore a bell. It wasn't around his neck, but it was rather large, and hung on a stick that lay across his saddle. The bell would always clang when the camels walked, so that the grooms would know the entire train was together and none wandered off. Farah, the camel, was feeling tired. It wouldn't be long before her baby would be born. It might even be while they were walking the trade route paths. She plodded on with the others for several days and nights. They always traveled at night and slept during the day, when it was too hot to travel. Camels don't like hot weather. Neither did the grooms. The sun was just rising above the horizon. The camel train stopped to rest in the shade of the trees at a small oasis. The goods were taken off their humps. Farah lay down to rest. She was very tired. When the groom went by a few hours later to feed them, much to his surprise, next to Farah lay a baby camel. The groom smiled, stroked the little camel, and urged him to get up and walk. He'd have to follow his mother, or he would die in the heat of the desert. Faisal got up and wobbled around, his legs rubbery and weak. The groom kept him walking, and just after a couple of hours he was able to run around. When the sun went down behind the horizon, the camels were roused, loaded again, and off they went. Little Faisal followed behind. He walked and walked and walked. His mother kept looking back at him to make sure he followed. She fed him whenever they stopped to rest. Faisal had a hard time. His new and not so strong little legs were tired. His mother was worried about him, but he stayed behind her and walked the whole night. That morning, as the sun rose again, the camel train stopped at their destination. The grooms unloaded all the precious goods off the camel's back and took them to the markets to sell. Farah walked over to the shade of a date palm and lay down. Faisal lay down next to her. She was so proud of him. He moved over and lay his head on her tummy and fell asleep. She was so proud of her baby camel. Tomorrow they would be loaded up again and began their trek to some new and distant land. Perhaps the groom would let Faisal carry something on his back. Farah smiled as she looked at the sun shining high in the desert sky. It was the beginning of a new day and a new life in the camel train for Faisal. I hope you enjoyed this story. Thank you for listening to Story Station. We are adding stories as frequently as possible, so check back often. We would love to hear your feedback and any questions you may have. Thank you.